Right now, as you watch this video, Iran is losing. It has lost its supreme leader. It has lost its navy. It has lost 3/4 of its missile launchers. American and Israeli aircraft have dropped over 12,000 bombs on Iranian territory. Tehran alone absorbed 3,600 of them. By every conventional military metric, this country should be finished. And here is the number that will stop you cold. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas published its analysis this week, and the conclusion buried inside page 7 is the most alarming economic sentence written in the 21st century. Iran, a country being bombed into rubble, has already lowered global GDP growth by an annualized 9 percentage points. Not its own GDP, the world's GDP, yours, mine, every country on earth. A nation losing a war did that in 28 days without winning a single major battle. That number is the map. That number tells you everything about what Iran's real strategy is, why it was never about surviving American bombs, and why the world order you grew up inside, the one built after World War II, the one with America at the center, may not survive this war, even if Iran does not either. Stay with me. Stay. Because what I am about to show you, built from sources at Foreign Policy, Chatham House, the Carnegie Endowment, the Federal Reserve, the United States Congress, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies, is the story that most channels covering this war are completely missing. They are tracking bombs and missiles. They should be tracking maps, because the map of global power is being redrawn right now, not by Iran's victories, by Iran's calculated, deliberate, strategic suffering. And if you do not understand the difference, you cannot understand what happens next. Let us start with what the map looked like on February 27th, 2026, one day before the bombs fell. The world was organized around a set of assumptions so deeply embedded that almost nobody even called them assumptions. They were just facts. American military power was unchallengeable. The Strait of Hormuz was open because America kept it open. The dollar was the world's reserve currency because global oil was priced in dollars, and global oil moved through American protected sea lanes. BRICS, the coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, and the UAE, was rising but fractured, too divided to challenge the Western-led order in any meaningful way. Russia was bogged down in Ukraine, economically strained, dependent on oil revenues that Western sanctions were slowly strangling. China was growing but careful, hedging between Washington and the emerging multipolar bloc, unwilling to choose a side publicly. And Iran, despite decades of sanctions and confrontation, remained the linchpin of something American strategists had spent 40 years trying to break: the axis of resistance, a network of proxy forces stretching from Tehran through Baghdad, through Damascus, through Beirut, through Sana'a, that gave Iran strategic depth across the entire Middle East, without deploying a single regular Iranian soldier outside its borders. That was the map on February 27th. Now look at what happened to it in 28 days. The bombs fell on February 28th. Khamenei was killed. The Strait of Hormuz closed on March 4th. And within 72 hours, according to Wikipedia's live economic impact tracker, which is drawing from the International Energy Agency, the IMF, and every major central bank simultaneously, something that had never happened before in the history of the global oil market began. The IEA described it with 3 words: greatest ever challenge. The full phrase, as the IEA's executive director stated publicly, was this: the greatest global energy and food security challenge in history. Not since the 1970s oil embargo, not since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, not since Saddam Hussein set Kuwait's oil wells on fire in 1991. The greatest in history. And it was caused not by Iran winning anything. It was caused by Iran closing 21 miles of water. Here is what those 21 miles actually control. According to the United States Congressional Research Service report published this week, 27% of all maritime crude oil and petroleum products on Earth pass through the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of global LNG supply, 45% of global sulfur exports, a significant portion of global helium, aluminum precursors, and fertilizer feedstocks. Brent crude hit $126 per barrel at its peak, according to Wikipedia's verified tracking. The Dallas Federal Reserve published modeling this week, showing that even if the strait reopens in the third quarter of this year, global GDP growth still falls by 9 percentage points annualized in Q2 2026. Every country on Earth loses economic output, not just oil importers, not just Asian markets, everyone. Because oil is not just fuel, it is embedded in the price of every physical object you can name: food, medicine, plastic, electronics, fertilizer. The clothes you are wearing right now contain synthetic fibers that trace back to petroleum. When the Strait of Hormuz closes, the price of everything moves. And CNBC reported this morning, today, March 28th, that oil executives and analysts are now warning that if the strait is not reopened by mid-April, the economic fallout could escalate sharply. That window is 3 weeks away. And there is no ceasefire. There is no deal. There is no sign that the strait reopens in 3 weeks. Now here is where the map starts to look completely different from what you have been told to expect. The country benefiting most from this war is not the United States. It is not Israel. It is Russia. This is not speculation. It is documented in a Toda Peace Institute analysis published 2 days ago, drawing on economic data and verified intelligence reporting. Russia built its entire federal budget for 2026 on an oil price assumption of approximately $60 per barrel. When this war began, oil surged past $100. It peaked at $126. According to Toda Peace Institute, that surge has rescued the Russian war budget, providing the Kremlin with the capital it needs to sustain its military operations in Ukraine. Every American bomb dropped on Iran, every day the Strait stays closed, every additional dollar Brent crude rises above 60 is a direct cash transfer into the Russian war machine fighting American-backed Ukraine. The United States is simultaneously fighting Iran to weaken its adversary network and inadvertently funding Russia to prolong a war in Europe. That is not a paradox. That is Iran's strategy working exactly as designed, even from underneath 12,000 bombs. But Russia is not just a passive beneficiary. U.S. officials confirmed to the Toda Peace Institute and other outlets that Moscow has been providing Iran with satellite imagery and targeting data on the locations of American warships and aircraft in the region. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi did not deny this. He stated in a televised interview that military cooperation with Russia and China still continues. Think about what that means. The country America is bombing is receiving targeting intelligence on American warships from a country America is sanctioning, and the bombs keep falling anyway. This is not the world order of 1991. This is not the world order of 2003. This is something genuinely new. China's position is even more strategically consequential and far less discussed. The Chatham House analysis, published last month and updated this week by their Middle East and North Africa program, reaches a conclusion that Beijing does not want you to notice. China's lack of decisive action in this war, its choice to issue diplomatic statements condemning the killing of Khamenei while doing nothing militarily, is not weakness. It is patience executed at a civilizational timescale. According to Carnegie Endowment for International Peace analysis published 3 weeks ago, even if the Iranian regime does not survive the U.S.-Israeli bombardment, its successor will have no choice but to engage with China, which holds a monopoly on the delivery of high-tech goods, and remains the primary buyer of Iranian oil, whatever government eventually runs what is left of the country. China does not need to save Iran militarily. It is waiting to be indispensable to whatever comes next. In the meantime, China's 2026 to 2030 5-year plan, submitted to the National People's Congress in March while this war was burning, reflects renewed momentum for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline with Russia, according to Toda Peace Institute. Beijing is using this war to accelerate its energy independence from Middle Eastern choke points it no longer trusts, precisely because this war has proven they can be disrupted without notice. And here is where the map gets truly shocking. The organization that was supposed to be the answer to American unipolarity, the grouping that China and Russia had spent 15 years building as the alternative architecture for the global order, BRICS, has completely failed its first real test. Foreign Policy published this analysis 2 weeks ago, and it deserves to be read as slowly as possible. When the United States and Israel launched a massive military attack on Iran, a BRICS member, the forum struggled to articulate any common response whatsoever. 2 weeks into the war, BRICS had issued no joint statement on the conflict. Zero. Not because the members did not care, because the members were playing for completely opposite sides. India, a BRICS member, has developed strong partnerships with Israel. The UAE, a BRICS member, joined BRICS in 2024 and has long-standing American security partnerships. Saudi Arabia, not formally a BRICS member, cooperated covertly with American military planning, according to regional analysts, while publicly calling for negotiations. Iranian drones struck UAE territory, meaning one BRICS member attacked another BRICS member. The grouping that was supposed to challenge American hegemony watched one of its own members get bombed into rubble and could not agree on what to say about it. Foreign Policy's C. Raja Mohan, a former member of India's National Security Advisory Board, wrote something this week that should end every conversation about multipolar utopia. He traced the history of every great solidarity project of the past century: Pan-Asianism, Pan-Islamism, Pan-Arabism, Communist internationalism, the non-aligned movement. Every single one followed the same trajectory. They flourished in moments of collective grievance, when the rhetoric of unity was powerful and the costs of solidarity remained low. They fractured the moment a real crisis forced governments to choose between the collective cause and their own national interest. BRICS, he concluded, has just failed that same test, not because the idea was wrong, because national interest always wins. But here is what Mohan's analysis does not fully capture. And it is the piece that makes this story so much larger than the war itself. The failure of BRICS does not mean the world order is stable. It means the world order is fragmenting in a way that has no clear successor. The Atlas Institute for International Affairs, in a deep geopolitical analysis published 2 weeks ago, drawing on multiple academic sources, identifies what they call the disruption of Eurasian integration as one of the 4 primary structural goals embedded in the U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran. For years, Iran occupied a central position in the international north-south transport corridor, a trade route connecting Russia to Indian Ocean markets through Iranian ports. It was an alternative to American-controlled sea lanes, a parallel nervous system for Eurasian commerce. Now that corridor runs through a war zone, the Belt and Road Initiative's connectivity through Iran is disrupted. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization's eastern anchor is on fire. The alternative architecture to the American order was being built around Iran. And Iran is being demolished. If that sounds like American strategic success, hold that thought. Because the Atlas Institute analysis, drawing on work by multiple geopolitical scholars, identifies the most dangerous possible outcome of this war for long-term American interests. If Iran fragments into a failed state, the analysis warns, it will create a vacuum similar to Iraq after 2003 and Syria after 2011, guaranteeing an endless, uncontrollable security nightmare for the greater Middle East. It will severely disrupt the emerging alignment between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And critically, it will force Sunni Arab states, which do not have nuclear weapons and cannot rely on a weakened Iran as a regional balance, to seek an alternative nuclear umbrella. The scholars cited by the Atlas Institute identify only one realistic candidate: Pakistan. With its existing nuclear arsenal, with its military deeply intertwined in Gulf security, with General Asim Munir already acting as the region's most active diplomatic intermediary. A nuclear Pakistan, becoming the de facto security guarantor for Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and potentially Egypt, would be one of the most profound shifts in global strategic architecture since the Soviet Union collapsed. And it would not be a pro-American shift. Pakistan's relationship with Washington has been deteriorating for years. A Pakistani nuclear umbrella over Gulf states is not the same as an American nuclear umbrella over Gulf states. The map that results from that shift is genuinely new. Nobody has drawn it yet. Meanwhile, the economic destruction is not waiting for the strategic analysis to catch up. The IEA has authorized the release of 400 million barrels from global strategic reserves, the largest emergency release in history, according to Al Jazeera's verified reporting. The United States held 415 million barrels in its strategic petroleum reserve as of February 18th, according to the Department of Energy. At the rate of global consumption of 105 million barrels per day, as tracked by the EIA, the entire 400 million barrel release covers roughly 4 days of global consumption. 4 days. The Dallas Fed's modeling published this week is explicit that emergency reserves can calm panic in markets, but cannot replace the lost function of a disrupted shipping corridor as long as the fundamental problem, the freedom of tanker movement through Hormuz, remains unresolved. Europe is facing its own catastrophe. Dutch TTF gas benchmarks have nearly doubled to over 60 euros per megawatt hour by mid-March, according to Wikipedia's economic impact tracking, because Europe gets 12 to 14% of its LNG from Qatar through the Strait. European gas storage was already at historically low levels following a harsh winter. The European Central Bank postponed interest rate cuts on March 19th, raised its inflation forecast, and cut GDP growth projections. UK inflation is expected to breach 5% this year. Chemical and steel manufacturers across the UK and EU have already imposed surcharges of up to 30% to offset surging energy costs. Japan gets 70% of its oil imports through the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea depends on the same corridor. The Gulf Cooperation Council states, meaning Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman, import over 80% of their caloric intake through the same strait that Iran has closed. By mid-March, 70% of the region's food imports were disrupted. Retailers were airlifting basic food staples. Countries that export oil were running short of food. The IRGC did not mince words about what it intended. Al Jazeera published the direct quote. The IRGC spokesperson said, "You will not be able to artificially lower the price of oil. Expect oil at $200 per barrel. The price of oil depends on regional security. And you are the main source of insecurity in the region." That statement was not a threat. It was a strategic declaration. Iran is telling the world that it has discovered a weapon that requires no missiles, no aircraft, no navy, no nuclear warhead. The weapon is geography. Iran sits on the northern shore of a 21-mile waterway through which the global economy's circulatory system flows. Every day that Iran can maintain that geography as a contested zone, every day that insurance companies refuse to cover ships transiting the strait, every day that tanker captains receive IRGC warnings over VHF radio and turn back, Iran extracts an economic toll from the entire world simultaneously. The IRGC commander told every ship in the region that any vessel attempting to pass would be set ablaze. Mariners heard it on international distress frequencies. The ship stopped. Without Iran firing a single missile, the strait closed. Insurance withdrawal did what a physical blockade requires a navy to do. And here is the piece that should genuinely frighten every analyst covering this war. According to CNBC reporting published today, the window for the strait to reopen before serious long-term economic damage becomes irreversible is closing. Oil executives and analysts warn the strait needs to reopen by mid-April. That is 3 weeks. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas modeling shows that even a one-quarter closure drops world GDP by 2, 9 points annualized. If the closure extends to 2 quarters, the model projects impacts comparable to the 2008 financial crisis. If it extends to 3 quarters, the economists stop using the word recession and start using the word structural. A Financial Times investigation found that $580 million in bets on falling oil prices were placed just 15 minutes before Trump posted about postponing Iran strikes for talks on March 23rd, triggering speculation about insider trading and calls for investigation. The 10-year bond yield jumped to 46% on March 27th, its highest level since July 2025. The 30-year mortgage rate climbed to 38% on March 26th. These are not Iran war statistics. These are American mortgage statistics. The war in Iran is in your mortgage rate right now. So here's the question that every government, every central bank, every strategic planning office in the world is wrestling with tonight. If Iran is losing this war militarily while simultaneously delivering the largest oil supply shock in human history, fracturing BRICS, rescuing Russia's war budget, accelerating China's energy independence, exposing the limits of American deterrence for every country watching, potentially triggering a Pakistani nuclear umbrella over the Gulf, and landing inside your fuel bill, your grocery receipt, and your mortgage rate, what does winning this war actually look like? And who is winning it? The map being drawn right now is not the map of who controls Iran's nuclear facilities. Those are mostly rubble. It is the map of who controls the narrative of what this war proved about the world order. China is quietly demonstrating that it will be indispensable to whatever Iran becomes next. Russia is replenishing its war chest on American bombs. Pakistan is positioning itself as the region's indispensable mediator and potential security guarantor. Turkey is passing messages between Tehran and Washington and earning strategic credit from both. The Gulf Arab states are simultaneously sheltering under American military protection and watching that protection fail to reopen a strait that holds their food supply hostage. And BRICS, the supposed challenger to American hegemony, has proven that when real stakes arrive, national interest dissolves every solidarity project ever built. Here is what to watch in the coming days that will tell you which version of this map becomes permanent. Watch whether oil executives' mid-April deadline passes without the strait reopening. If it does, every economic projection worsens, and political pressure on every government dependent on Gulf energy becomes unsustainable. Watch Pakistan. If General Munir's shuttle diplomacy produces anything, it will be the clearest signal yet that Islamabad has become the indispensable power broker in a region where Washington and Tehran cannot speak directly. Watch China's 5-year plan implementation. The infrastructure decisions Beijing makes in the next 60 days about the power of Siberia 2, pipeline and belt and road rerouting, will tell you whether China has concluded that Middle Eastern energy routes are permanently unreliable and is reorganizing its economic architecture accordingly. And watch the mortgage rate, watch your fuel bill, watch your grocery receipt. Because the most honest map of this war is not drawn in military intelligence assessments or diplomatic cables. It is drawn in the prices of ordinary things in countries that have never once considered themselves part of this conflict. Iran did not win this war. Iran may not survive this war. But Iran has done something that changes the world, regardless of whether it survives. It has proven that a country can be militarily destroyed while simultaneously delivering an economic shock that reaches every nation on Earth. It has exposed the fragility of the architecture the entire modern world was built on, and it has forced every major power to reveal, in public, in real time, exactly where its loyalties end and its national interests begin. That revelation is the map. And that map, drawn in oil prices and bond yields and food import disruptions and fractured alliances, is going to outlast this war by decades. The strait is 21 miles wide. The world it controls is everything.